Hello, everyone, again, and welcome to today's webinar, NAD Plus Meet Your Body's Unsung Hero. I am Brittany. Some of you may know me as Coach Brittany. Some of you might know me on social media. I am the social media manager here at Shed, and I'm also a health coach here at Shed. And today I am going to be your host for today's webinar. We are so excited that you guys are here today because we are diving into a topic that is starting to get a lot of buzz and for very good reason. Even celebrities you might have seen, Hailey Bieber, Kendall Jenner, and even Erin Andrews talking about NAD, what it is, and how they are absolutely obsessed with it. If you have ever looked in the mirror and wondered how to slow down the aging process, not just on the outside, but at a deep cellular level, you are not alone. I know so many of us are with you on that. Maybe you are starting to experience some of the outward effects of aging, like wrinkles or graying hair, or maybe you're starting to experiencing other effects of aging that go beyond the surface and affect your daily routines. So maybe things like brain fog, fatigue, slower recovery, or even chronic joint pain. The thing is, these effects of aging are just surface level symptoms. What's really happening is much deeper. It is a slowdown at the cellular level where your metabolism, energy production, and even DNA repair start to decline. And that's exactly where NAD plus supplementation comes in. So in March, Shed introduced our NAD plus nasal spray as one of the first medications in our new longevity and vitality category. And just last month, we followed it up with our NAD plus injections. Today, we are going to break it all down. I am joined by internal medicine physician Dr. Niazi. He's going to walk us through the science, the benefits, and answer your burning questions about NAD Plus at the end. So there is a little Q&A box down at the bottom. It literally says Q&A. If you guys have questions that come up throughout this webinar, feel free to, at that time, pop them into that Q&A box. I will be moderating those at the very end, and we'll be kind of giving those to Dr. Niazi, and he's going to answer those as well. So without further ado, Dr. Niazi, welcome. We're so excited. Go ahead and
Thank
dive
you.
on in.
Absolutely, Brittany. I think you couldn't have given a better introduction, so I have a hard task to follow up. But first and foremost, I wanted to introduce myself and say hi to everybody here. So I'm Dr. Niazi. I'm an internal medicine physician by trade. I've been in practice now on my own for approximately 3 years now. Two of those years with Shed RX, and it's been a pleasure and a joy to say the very least. What we started off with was a company that offered weight loss for patients in a holistic fashion. And now we've started to offer a lot more medications, as Brittany was mentioning, one of which has been NAD plus, which has been massively popular. Even on my side as a private clinician, it's something that I had a lot of experience with, and I've used it with a lot of my patients, and has done wonders for patients, including myself as well. And so I'm very excited today to have a chat with you about NAD plus. I'm going to go into the details of how the medication works, things to look out for, why it's important for patients to use NAD plus. And at the end, if you have any questions, let me know as well. Feel free to ask anything. There are no dumb questions. Awesome. So I'm gonna start off with the main question about what NAD plus is. I have some notes that I'm going to read off of just to sort of guide me in the right direction. And then again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask it at the end. And so, what is NAD plus? So it stands for Nicotinamide Adenine Dinucleotide, which is a mouthful, I know. It falls into the vitamin B3 category. For example, niacin is the other name for vitamin B3. These specific substrate is a coenzyme that's found in every single cell in your body. So it's found in your heart cells, it's found in your muscle cells, and particularly works as a coenzyme to help with ATP production. So it helps with energy production in your body. And so that's one side of what it does. The other side has to do with DNA protection. So it helps with something called acetylation specifically. And this has to do with the properties of the DNA and the gene expression, and then longevity as well, essentially damage to the genes themselves. And so it can be very important for energy production and also from a longevity standpoint as well. Beyond just that, with the gene regulation and then also the metabolism of your cell as a whole. And so the main thing to remember is that without NAD plus, your body cannot produce ATP, which is the single most important molecule in your body, which is the energy currency of life, if you will. And then beyond just that, they work hand in hand with proteins called sirtuins. So sirtuins are your helper cells, if you will. They're also present in every body. They're really there to prevent the breakdown or the degradation of DNA. So that acetylation that I was mentioning earlier, they fall into a family of proteins that help to regulate cellular aging, cellular health, inflammation, and then DNA repair. They're referred to as the longevity genes because they essentially help you to survive through stress and also to promote a metabolic balance as well. And so NAD essentially is the fuel for these sirtuins or these proteins, if you will. And so, again, as I was mentioning earlier, the sirtuins can be very, very important because they're important in removing the acetyl groups from the proteins, particularly in these things called histones, which affects the gene expression. So it can be very important for that as well. So the way I view sirtuins are gene whisperers that really only function when NAD is present. And so some other interesting stuff I wanted to touch upon was the history about NAD plus. So we've actually known about NAD plus for over 100 years now. So it was discovered originally in 1906 by Sir Arthur Harden and John Young. Actually, they were studying it in yeast, and they found that when they put NAD plus in yeast, that it was producing alcohol a lot quicker, which makes sense. Again, how it works with ATP production, and particularly in the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. And then it was found to be a coenzyme that helped with this sort of solution. And then in the 1930s, they found that a certain medical condition called pellagra was present in patients that had a deficiency of vitamin B3, which is again is that precursor niacin to NAD as a whole. And so that can lead to skin issues, GI issues, and also problems with mental fatigue and also brain fog, as well as Brittany was mentioning. And so some other important things. So in the late 90s and the early 2000s, that's essentially when NAD really took off from the standpoint of aging and longevity as a whole. And there were two specific doctors that were in part of this, Dr. Garante and then Dr. Sinclair. And that's where they discovered the role of the sirtuins, those helper proteins that I was mentioning earlier, which help to prevent the breakdown of your DNA molecule, which is so important towards longevity, towards neuroprotection and healthy aging as well. And so the second major question was, how does NAD plus work? And so it has what I like to call two separate roles, one in the mitochondria, one outside the mitochondria. So the first role, as I'd mentioned earlier, helps with something called the Krebs cycle. So if you guys are familiar with a little bit of chemistry back from high school and from college, I'm going to bore you a little bit. But essentially, it helps to work as a substrate, if you will, with something called phosphorylation, essentially to produce ATP in your body, which again is that energy currency. So think of it like more NAD plus produces more energy for you, specifically from the mitochondria of the cell. And again, beyond just that, they work with the sirtuins, the proteins, to prevent the breakdown of your DNA as well. In addition to that, what they also do is work with redox reactions. So NAD in and of itself is not a agent that prevents oxidation directly, but indirectly, because it helps produce something called glutathione, which is the most potent antioxidant agent in your body. So you can think of it as an antioxidant agent, but just indirectly, but it's very important for that as well. So again, producing energy, ATP, it helps to prevent the degradation of DNA, and then also is a very, very powerful indirect antioxidant as well. And probably the most important question here is, why does NAD plus decline? So obviously, as you age, as we all go through life, we deal with stress. And stress can come in many forms. It can be just from adrenal stress, from the release of cortisol, which is your stress hormone, right? It can come from alcohol abuse, from other substance abuse, and then also environmental toxins. This sort of degrades the way that your energy is able to be produced in the mitochondria of the cell. And so over time, the NAD can decrease. So much so that there have been many, many studies that found that typically in your fourth or fifth decade of life, your NAD levels can decrease by about over 50%. So typically speaking, NAD levels peak in your early 20s and then they decrease by decade. So by the time you get to your 40s and your 50s, it's almost halved. So if you guys are experiencing, for example, brain fog, fatigue, you feel like you're not getting restful sleep, if you feel like when you're at work, you're not able to think clearly, and if you're feeling like you're not able to recover well from, let's say, a workout, you're suffering from a cold, these are all things that could indicate that your levels of NAD are low. And the other thing that I want to emphasize is that I believe that your 30s are a very important decade in your life. That's essentially the last time that the train will leave the train station, if you will. So it's very important that you act quickly when it comes to NAD. Try to get as much of it replenished in your body early on so that you prevent the long-term damage in the form of DNA and also energy as well later on in life. So again, if you have a decrease of NAD, some of the things that you can experience are the things I mentioned. So fatigue and burnout, brain fog, poor memory, slower metabolism overall, and then a weakened immune resilience, and then also accelerated aging as well, which can come in many different forms. It can come in forms of muscle recovery and then also skin health as well. And so, to that same point, well, what are the key benefits of NAD optimization? So, obviously, the biggest thing that you'll notice, and one of the first things I noticed in myself when I took NAD and with patients, was energy. You'll definitely notice a boost of energy. But the reason I love NAD Plus is it gives a natural boost of energy. So, you're not going to get that jitteriness that you would, per se, with caffeine, for example. So it feels like a very clean, sustained, healthy boost of energy. Beyond just that, just focus, mental clarity. You're able to think better, form your words better, more crisper, more clear. You're able to remember things better. For example, if you're at work, and then beyond just that, supporting healthy age and also metabolic function as well. Beyond that, there are studies that show that might protect neurons as well, specifically with ALS, which is a very devastating neurological condition. There were some studies that showed promise that it doesn't obviously cure ALS, but it can slow down the progression of ALS, in addition to other neurodegenerative diseases as well. For example, Parkinson's disease was one, and then also dementia in general as well. And then obviously it strengthens the body's own internal antioxidant system, kind of going back to the glutathione that I was mentioning earlier. And so the other question that I wanted to tackle on that same topic was who can benefit from NAD plus. So really this medication is designed to be used by practically everybody, but essentially designed for high stress individuals. So this can be shift workers, if you're a professional, if you're somebody at a high level working in a company, you're under constant stress. The other area where I've seen it used in my own private practice was long COVID patients. So long COVID is a phenomenon that you may or may not be aware of, but a lot of patients suffer from it. And essentially, it has to do with both physical and issues with mental fatigue that go on for months, sometimes even years after a patient develops COVID. It's very poorly understood. I actually remember when I was a resident, we had a long COVID clinic when I was in my training, and I remember it can be devastating for patients to have to experience. And we really try to throw everything we can at these patients. But for example, NAD has done wonders on these patients when it comes to sort of boosting their mental clarity and their energy overall. And so it helps in those patients. Athletes as well is a big category. And this is why you'll hear it with famous celebrities, for example, as well. And then anyone suffering from a post-viral syndrome as well can benefit from this too. And then the other category is post-surgical patients as well. If you're someone that just had a surgery and you're wanting to recover, this can be a wonderful option for you. So essentially, in a nutshell, anyone that's suffering from chronic fatigue, brain fog, and then just burnout of your adrenal gland as well. And so the other thing that I wanted to touch upon just briefly, it wasn't in the main poster, but what are some of the contraindications of NAD plus? So the main one to look out for is anyone with a history of coronary artery disease. So that's CAD, or anyone that's had a myocardial infarction, generally not recommended. If you were in the actual private clinic setting, we could have a discussion then, but being a telemedicine clinic, we can't really follow you up that close. So it'd be more of an individual basis, but in general, you have to be watched carefully if you have a history of heart disease. In addition, on that same topic, anybody who's on blood pressure medications as well, one of the issues or concerns with the NAD plus becomes a hypotension or a low blood pressure as well. So not a absolute contraindication, but it is something to watch. And again, have that individualized discussion. The other thing to watch out for is anticoagulants. Specifically, warfarin is the one. It can interact to some degree with anticoagulants. Again, not an absolute, contraindication, but one of those things where we have to have a discussion and just sort of warn you as the patient. And the other one's very interesting. So active chemotherapy as well. So anyone that has active cancer or is undergoing active chemotherapy, it's also contraindicated in those patients as well, just because of the whole effect on the DNA repair. It can actually work against the chemotherapy there. And then beyond that, patients who are diabetic as well. And this has to do with the fact that NAD plus can actually impact insulin sensitivity. So in those patients, they have to be monitored as well. The main fear there is the low sugar in the body. And then beyond that, anyone who's pregnant or breastfeeding as well. And that's just because we don't have data on those specific demographics. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch upon was, and this is a common question I get asked, is what's the best time of the day to take NAD plus? So that's a great question. Particularly, I found that most doctors are in agreement that typically taking NAD plus at the beginning of the day on an empty stomach is generally the best time to take NAD plus. So typically you'll wake up and then you'll take your NAD. And then some patients even take it before their workout as a pre-workout as well. The one thing I do like to harp on is consistency. So just like with the GLP-1 side where you're injecting once a week, it's a very similar sort of thing here. You try to stick to the same time of the day. And then as Brittany was mentioning, we launched NAD Plus approximately 2 months ago. It's been very popular with our patients. All of my patients with NAD have done wonderful thus far. And she's absolutely right. We first started off with the nasal spray, which has really been a game changer because prior to this NAD Plus, we can't really give it orally because of how it's metabolized. It doesn't work as well if you take it in your gut. It's broken down. So it doesn't really get the effect that we'd like unless we go to very high dosages. What's nice about the nasal spray is that it bypasses the gut barrier and also the blood-brain barrier as well. So it's very effective for patients to use. We offer 3 different protocols for patients. We have the standard, we have the advanced, and then the plus. And that just really depends on your previous experience with NAD, how much if you've used it before, and then also how significant is your fatigue and the energy boost as well, in addition to your weight as well. And then we also offer the subcutaneous as well. Now, with the subcutaneous, pretty standard, kind of similar to the GLP-1 side, but here it's going to be injected 3 times a week subcutaneously, and then we increase the dose at the end of every week. And then the maximum dose there is 0.5 mLs. Again, still better to be taken on an empty stomach. So that's most of everything that I wanted to really touch upon. Like I wanted to summarize at the end the main questions for today on the poster, at least. So basically, what is NAD plus? Again, it's a coenzyme that's essential to energy, metabolism, DNA repair, and aging defense. And then what is it used for? Primarily used for fatigue, brain fog, aging, stress recovery, and overall cellular function. How does it work? So as I mentioned, it does power your mitochondria to produce that energy and then supports that internal repair system by protecting your DNA. And then how does it decline? Through aging, through stress, poor sleep, illness, inflammation, and environmental toxins. And then what are the benefits? As I mentioned, more energy, better focus, cellular function, stronger resilience, and then clearer thinking as well. So hopefully this is a good starting point. It answered some of your questions today. Please feel free to ask as well if there's anything else I missed here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Niazi. That was a very comprehensive overview of what NAD is, signs that you might be low on NAD, and how you can kind of supplement with our injections and nasal spray. So I will go ahead and open up Q&A. I have a few that have already come in. If you guys have any questions or want him to expand on anything that he mentioned today, feel free to drop that in the box below. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first one is, does energy interfere with my sleep?
So no, and I think this harkens back to what I was saying earlier, is that the way this medication works, that it promotes your own natural energy inside your cells, specifically with the mitochondria. So you're not actually adding something new per se. It's not like caffeine. So the energy effect that you'll get is a very natural, sustained energy. And to the point on sleep, it doesn't necessarily help with sleep, like it doesn't help to get you to sleep, for like, for example, melatonin would do, or it doesn't increase the length of your sleep, but it promotes the restfulness. So you'll have more deep REM sleep, we call it. So you'll feel more rested when you wake up. And this is from my own personal anecdotal experience using NAD. You'll just wake up more overall refreshed as an individual. I've seen this with my patients, and this actually was the number one effect that I saw. That was a positive effect on patients. I generally did not experience jitteriness throughout sleep, for example. So no, great question.
Awesome. How can I check NAD level?
Great question. So this is a blood serum test that you can do. This is actually offered in a lot of different aging clinics, for example. It's been very popular, and yes, there is a certain level that you want to be in, and then usually every decade of life it decreases by approximately a third. So it keeps decreasing on and on. Typically peaks again in your early 20s, and by the time you hit your 40s and 50s, it can be decreased by half. So it's important to check that as well. Absolutely.
I think this person would like to clarify for the NAD plus injections, it is 3 times a week, correct? Or can you repeat that dosing information?
Absolutely. Great question, Brittany. Yes, it is 3 times a week. Generally speaking, what I like to do is Monday, Wednesday, Friday is just a general split that makes it easy for patients to use. But yes, it's a 3 times a week injection, subcutaneous. And again, I typically recommend to patients to take it early in the morning on an empty stomach as well. Yeah.
Should GLP-1 patients watch out for low blood sugar issues while on NAD? I'm sure we have so many people who are on GLP-1 injections here.
Wonderful question. This was something actually we were kind of concerned with ourselves as doctors. There's very little evidence out there that there is any sort of hypoglycemic sort of episodes or concerns. Generally speaking, I would say I have not personally in my own clinical practice and in the literature seen anything that would cause us to be worried about combining the both. We have several of our patients that are on both and they've done wonderful. I think this is more along the lines of patients who are on insulin. For example, there are certain medications for diabetes called sulfonylureas, which can actually increase insulin production. In those patients, I could see it being a risk. And again, it sort of helps with insulin sensitivity, so it enhances the effect of the GLP-1, but it's not so much so that it would cause it would cause an episode per se. Yeah.
Could you maybe also just briefly talk about the benefit of being on a GLP-1 and also taking NAD plus? I know a lot of people kind of do both, and like what would be the benefit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main benefit with GLP-1s is you're essentially rewiring your hunger drive, right? The way that GLP-1 medications work, and this is something I also like to stress, GLP-1s are not something exogenous that your body doesn't already produce. It's a natural peptide that's already found naturally in your gut. And so the way it works is essentially GLP-1, when it's up regulated, it'll decrease or slow down something called gastric emptying, right? It's essentially just keeping food in your stomach for a longer period of time, allowing you to get full faster and stay full longer. But beyond just that and decreasing your food noise, it also works on your insulin levels, essentially keeps them steady and stable throughout the day, which to some degree the NAD plus does as well. So think of it like a synergistic effect, if you will. So it just promotes and enhances it even further. So the NAD side is more for the longevity, for sleep, for energy, for boosting, and then the GLP-1 can be more for the weight loss and the blood glucose regulation as well. But one of the reasons I like to combine the two, one of the side effects, unfortunately, of a GLP-1, as I'm sure a lot of our patients who have tried it, is fatigue. Now, we combat this with vitamin B12 that we can add on the compounded side, but when it comes to NAD plus, it's a wonderful option for patients because sometimes we've tried the NAD plus, I've tried the lifestyle modifications, I've told patients to, to eat small meals that are high protein, low fats, and low carbs, but sometimes it just doesn't work. So NAD can be a wonderful add-on to those patients for sure.
That's wonderful. I think something you mentioned too that as a health coach stands out to me is this holistic approach that we take to weight loss, right? So it's not just about what you eat and how much you're exercising, it's also about sleep, right? And so NAD, I have heard you mention sleep so many times, and I know some of our influencers that we work with mention that effect being one of the primary effects that they experience and benefit from on this medication. And so when you're sleeping well, you have more motivation to exercise, you have more energy to cook yourself yourself, those whole food meals and all of that. So it's really cool to see how everything is so interconnected.
Absolutely, Brittany. And to even add to your point, a deep restful sleep, as I was mentioning earlier, which is one of the things NAD is able to accomplish, is critical for the body for recovery and for the release of growth hormone. The human body releases almost 80 to 90% of its growth hormone throughout the day at night while you're in deep sleep. And unfortunately, a lot of our patients, and anyways, just people in general, don't reach deep sleep. They'll sleep, but they don't have a restful sleep, and that's because they're not reaching deep REM sleep. And so one of the benefits of NAD, it helps to promote that. So that's obviously very, very important. The more growth hormone you release, obviously, the more muscle you'll make, and also is one of the most potent fat burners as well. So very important to have a good sleep quality. Absolutely.
Okay, there's one question. I'll answer this one. Will injections be available in California? Right now, we do only have the nasal spray available in California. We are working on getting injections in California as well. So definitely stay tuned for that. I just wanted to answer that really quick. And then let's see. So another question on any lab work recommendations to check NAD levels. I know you already answered that, but the second question from this person is what if there's too much NAD plus?
Yeah. So one of the things I love about NAD is very similar to vitamin B and C, which are water soluble vitamins. You really can't have too much of it, if you will. There's never an issue with having too much because essentially what will happen is, assuming that you have good kidneys, you'll basically go to the bathroom and just get rid of it that way. So it's not something that accumulates. This is in contrast to other vitamins, like for example, vitamins A, D, E, and K, which are fat soluble, which can accumulate and can be toxic in large effects to your liver. But you don't have to worry about this with NAD plus. Again, the way that NAD plus is made is through vitamin B3 or niacin, which is a water soluble vitamin. Thank God. It's always good.
Perfect. And then kind of on top of what you just shared, what's the max dosage of NAD per week? And is there a maintenance period after a certain period?
Great question. And yes, the maximum dose for the subcutaneous is that zero point 0.5 ml, which again is the dose you'll be taking 3 times a week. So essentially, what it'll be is 15 ml total if you combine it together. And essentially, yes, there is always a maintenance, if you will. The idea is to get your levels up to a certain point, and once you're starting to feel the benefits of the medication with better sleep, with better cognition, with better energy boosting throughout the day, then eventually we'll reach a point where we'll go down on the dose. It's very similar to a GLP-1 in that regard, where we sort of taper you on the medication and slowly taper you off the medication as well. Yeah.
Okay, a good question here. What is the main difference between intranasal versus injection as far as efficacy? And then the second part to this question is how long should we expect benefits for symptoms such as sleep quality for intranasal?
Great question. So one of the reasons I love the intranasal, beyond just the fact that it's so novel, is that it actually bypasses the gut barrier, which is an important issue. As I told you earlier, NAD is really poorly absorbed in the gut. We can't really give NAD. We can give precursors like NMN, NR, but they have their issues, which is a different topic for another day. And so giving it orally doesn't work well. But the spray actually bypasses the gut barrier, obviously, but it also bypasses the blood-brain barrier. And the effects are almost instantaneous. Within an hour or two, you'll feel the energy boost. Now, to your other question about the sleep quality, that can take a little bit longer. Typically, 3 days. In about 72 hours is when you'll start seeing an effect on your sleep. And again, I really want to stress the fact that it improves sleep quality. So it doesn't help with sleep, sort of getting you to sleep, like, for example, a melatonin would. It doesn't increase the length of sleep, but it increases the quality of sleep. So you'll feel more restful. You'll feel more rested overall, essentially, from your sleep. But yeah.
Okay, and do we have to keep taking the injection after we reach the weight goal to maintain it, or once we reached, will we
Cool
be okay
energy.
to stop taking it?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those things like the GLP-1 side that eventually, when you reach your goal in terms of your energy levels, your sleep quality, and your overall, cognition, eventually what we'll do, as I mentioned, is a slow taper off the medication. So it's very similar to the GLP-1 side. So no, it's not a medication that you have to take for life. for that reason. Yeah.
Perfect. And then last question here. Feel free to drop any more that you guys have, or else we'll wrap up after this one. But the last one is, will private insurance cover NAD plus? The answer is no to that. We do have insurance acceptance coming for some of our other medications very, very soon. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much again, Dr. Niazi,
You're very welcome.
for being here today, for answering all of these questions. For everyone who joined, thank you guys so much for being here today and joining us. We hope you are walking away with a deeper understanding of why NAD Plus is quickly becoming the go-to for anyone looking to slow aging, boost energy, and step into the real and best version of you. If you're ready to experience the benefits for yourself, you can get started with NAD Plus nasal spray or injections today by heading to our website at tryshed.com. As always, we are here to support you on every step of your wellness journey with a dedicated member success team, our incredible health coaches, providers, and nurses, and we cannot wait for you to feel the difference as you get started. Thanks again for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Absolutely. Bye. Take care. Thank you so much.